Hi, everybody. My name is Martin Adams. Absolute pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm going to be talking to you about enabling something called continuous innovation. Now, I want to start by acknowledging, of course, the reality, right? It's been a tremendously difficult period in the world for businesses and for people. Lenin, I think his quote really sums this up. There are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. We've certainly had many of those weeks and months and years recently. This isn't just a kind of platitude, quite literally in the data this plays out as well. If we look at online delivery, the same amount of online delivery that happened in the previous decade happened in an 8-week period in the middle of lockdown across Europe. And we've seen similar trends across education, e-learning software, media streaming, etc., etc. And what's particularly interesting and forms the basis for a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today is the fact that, the nature of this crisis has been that it's actually driven connection. So, the maturity of usage and capability around broadband, Wi-Fi, cloud, obviously distributed and remote working, social media, mobile. Cloud providers alone have seen a 775% increase in cloud service usage over the course of the last year. And this is key because it's not simply that there is an accelerated pace of change. The point here is that we've actually seen a change in what people need, what people want, what people expect. So your customer base, the market, your audience have all got different expectations and demands that they now want you to respond to. And my experience working with corporates and government and startups is that the best corporates now actually think about innovation like startups do. And this maybe shouldn't be very surprising. Every day is a crisis for a startup. There's never enough money in the bank. There's never, you don't really have a right to exist. You don't have a big brand name to lean on. You can't offer security. You have to innovate to survive. So when I say, think and learn from startups, as I'm going to today, it's not about having ping pong tables and offering free beer nights and things like that. It's about engaging in this continuous innovation approach. And really that comes down to three things. So it's about looking at innovation as more than simply technology and putting new technology into the world. It's about treating innovation as a responsive discipline, which I'll talk about in a second. It's also about treating innovation as an insightful discipline. So something that you need to have a non-obvious insight to understand something that wasn't previously available to you in order to innovate efficiently, effectively, successfully, and quickly. And then third, innovation is really about being flexible around pricing, flexible around business model, something that startups have traditionally done very, very well. And now corporates, the most successful, are getting rewarded for treating innovation in the same way. So this first secret of startups that I'd love to give you to take away today is really treating innovation as a responsive discipline. So this is people get in their own way when it comes to innovation. They believe it needs to be complicated. They believe that innovation is essentially the preserve of well-funded West Coast startups or businesses with mad scientists. And if you don't have either of those, you kind of can't innovate. But of course, that's nonsense. Innovation is solving problems. That's what innovation really is. And the only way to solve problems is to understand what someone needs. So in that sense, innovation is a responsive discipline. Those problems are not our own. They're not our business challenges. They're not our problems around margin, our problems around productivity, our problems around whatever. They're about the problems of the market, of a subset niche of a market that we're trying to address. The problem is it's very hard to identify these need states and this demand from a subset of the market when you think about your audience or customers in very broad demographic ways. So if we take Prince Charles, for example, and then the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, very different people. If we were going to build a product or bring that product to market, we would have to do it in a very, very different way to appeal to them. We know that intuitively. But if we were using demographic definitions, which most big corporates do, actually we would look at them the same way. So they're both British, they both live in the southeast of the UK, they're both male, they're both wealthy, they both have 2 children, they both have dogs, they both like to ski in the Alps in the winter, etc., etc. You get the idea. The point is, when we're using demographics, we can't land a punch. We can't build anything quickly or effectively or precisely because we have an imprecise demographic understanding of who people are. And so while only 5% of people define themselves based on their profession or 6% based on their gender or their socioeconomic status, 70% of people identify themselves based on their values and their interests and their passions and their personality. So it's really worth asking yourself whether the way that you understand and talk about the market is based on this. So someone like L'Oreal take this very, very seriously, one of their makeup brands. Instead of putting out a generic new makeup product, they actually tried to understand and identify the interests and the cultural passions of a subset of their market. They saw that there was an interest around sort of romantic, gothic horror. They saw that there was a new TV show coming out on Netflix, and so they made a product around that and did a sort of collaboration and launch with Netflix. And, great commercial success, sold it all, sell out of the product within 24 hours. So this really sort of stands out and was considered very, very innovative in its category because it was about responding to a non-obvious sort of need of the audience. So ask yourself, do you have a team? Does this team focus on sort of identifying audiences based on their interests and passions, and does it share that view of the audience or the customer base across the organization? If not, you certainly should. And linked to that, treating innovation as an insightful discipline, something that startups do and corporates should and are starting to. So starting to use, personality analysis, natural language processing, social listening, content analysis. So using companies like IBM Watson or Sprinklr or Codec or Brandwatch to actually use this sort of analytic capabilities to understand people based on their online interactions with one another and with content. And it's not simply sort of insight, it's also foresight. So the world's biggest companies have moved from simply trying to understand the past and towards predicting the future. So this is enabling proactive innovation because you're able to model for alternative futures or identify small markets that don't yet exist. And using these technologies, so good companies like Upside, very, very active and effective in that space. One of the things that you're doing is you're moving from insight and foresight in the kind of human realm and onto understanding it where the real action is now happening. One of the characteristics of this crisis, of course, has been that it's pushed us online. So internet usage has gone up 70% over the course of the last year. E-commerce that used to be sort of 10 years ago 5% of retail is now 25%. That's up 6% in the last year. So we need to be using these technologies and these capabilities because they're focused on the global audiences and where most of the behavior and increasingly the consumption and purchase now takes place. And the third and final kind of secret that I want to take really from startups to share with you as corporates is flexibility. So we know that the rewards of winning are exponential now in this new market. The winners are getting further ahead and the losers further behind. And the smartest corporates are innovating. They're doing it through flexibility. So flexibility around pricing and flexibility essentially around pivoting, around business models and the customer base that they focus on. So clearly, cloud and mobile computing, social networking, big data, IoT, these are driving demand for flexible consumption. We've established that. But also the smartest businesses are responding with flexible pricing around that consumption. So flexible consumption models basically allow, let's say in software, rather than buying the big monolithic sort of license, you can buy discrete small parts of the product and maybe do it on a daily or a monthly or a shorter term basis based on essentially what you need. So ask yourself if you could break up your offering to be more flexibly consumed and priced. This gives you deeper insights into customer consumption patterns. It helps provide an ongoing sort of relationship that could lead to higher retention. And generally speaking, Embrace the pivot. Embrace the pivot. So hotel businesses that have started to offer out, because no one was able to stay in their hotel room, offering out those rooms as places to work, to get away from the kids, to have a meeting, to do a conference call, or businesses that used to rely on sort of big retailers and supermarkets starting to go direct to consumer. These people have embraced the idea that their audience may change or that the way to reach them needs to change. And I would really, really encourage that kind of flexibility to be embraced both on sort of pricing, on delivery, and on business model. So in summary, look, think like a startup. There are big rewards for doing that. Innovation doesn't have to be daunting. It's about responding to specific customers. It can't be done in a boardroom. It needs to be done digitally now. It needs to be done with reference to insight and foresight technological capabilities, and it has to be continuous. If you do that, the rewards will be very significant, and the time to do that is most certainly now. Have a good day. Thank you.